Hello everyone, Loremaster of Sotech, and yes, I figured out how to stop going partially invisible. I have cured myself of the Ice Maiden's curse, and I am now solid once more. Hopefully there won't be further issues with camera stuff. But I wanted to make a video because a lot of people have been pinging me about this Old World Almanac revolving around Grand Cathay, because apparently there is quite a bit of new information that's included on here. So we're going to work our way through this, and kind of depending on where we end up at the end, we may also look at some other articles that have come out as well about Grand Cathay, as we are building up to their release, which is going to be coming out pretty soon. There have been quite a few I wouldn't even call them rumors, but there have been a number of individuals out in the wild who have already reported receiving like boxes and stuff, so they're kind of ramping up for the pre-orders, which is pretty exciting stuff. But with all that in mind, let's dive into this article, which is called A Short History of Grand Cathay, which of course is getting us ready for the release of the actual article. Man, I gotta say, the artwork looks super good. Their version, the tabletop version of the Jade Longma, is admittedly, and somewhat unfortunately, significantly cooler than the ones we have in Total War. The ones we have in Total War are more just kind of horses with scales and dragon wings, whereas these ones are actual full-on dragon horses. They're kind of crazy looking. I would love to get Led's bigger variant as just a side variant. But anyway, what do we have here? The expeditionary armies of Grand Cathay are even now surging west in order to reinforce a beleaguered old world, struggling under the shadow of chaos. But what actually is Grand Cathay? True, merchant ships and ambassadorial delegations are not uncommon in the great port cities of the Empire, but Marienburg is a long way from Weijin, and the average citizen knows little of the wonders of the Celestial Dragon Empire. In the second part of an extensive chat with the design team behind Grand Cathay, we discuss the lore. So already it's so odd that they're running with this storyline. I assume they have their reasons in like the grand scheme, but I am admittedly very, I don't want to say concerned, because it's not that. But I do think it's very strange that they're running with this whole thing of Miao Ying abandoning her position at the Great Bastion to come help the Empire. Because it's like, why would Grand Cathay care? But maybe that's what we'll find out. So let's dive in. Owen. Grand Cathay is the mightiest human empire in the world of legend, a place of civilization, prosperity, and magic, and harmony above all else. It's ruled by the Celestial Dragon Emperor and his Empress Consort. These are immortal beings of immeasurable power, but they rule with benevolence over a people united in purpose. Yes, benevolence. Totally no weird or controversial things that they do. Nope, they're purely good guys. They are dragons who can assume human form, ruling from the capital city Weijin, a wondrous place that literally floats in the sky. Unlike much of the old world at this time, Grand Cathay is intrinsically magical by its very nature, and its people could not imagine a world without. Though, I feel like that's a little misleading, because Weijin itself doesn't float. The palace does, like the Celestial City, which is like the main power center of the dragon and the Empress. That floats in the sky, but the city of Weijin doesn't, because it's huge. It's a big sprawling city, but there's a part of it technically that floats in the sky. The Emperor and Empress have 9 children, each of them dragons, several of whom administrate the different regions, and unlike the Empire band of the old world, these regions are at peace. Of course, they're well aware of the threat of chaos and have dispatched a mighty fleet headed by Miao Ying, the Storm Dragon, to bolster the old world. Much of this will be familiar to players of Total War Warhammer 3, which maps out the entire empire in great detail. Grand Cathay is almost a world unto itself in scale. We quickly realized that not just that we could create connections with the old world and its past, but that the size and scope of Grand Cathay is every bit as vast and diverse as the old world, with the hinterlands of Koresh, the Hobgoblin tribes, Nippon, and so on. It's almost a completely contained setting. Warhammer has spent 40 years in the old world, and there would be enough here to do the same, not that we're planning on it. So, what I will say is that they're right, that there is as much going on around Grand Cathay as there is in the old world. And you could do an entire edition, entire thing around that. Something that I have actually talked quite a bit about, and people I think have thought I've been joking, but I really, really haven't, would be that if the old world continued to be a very, very successful game, and there was enough of an interest in, I would say like 2 or 3 years, not anytime soon, but if there was enough interest in the future that people really feel like there is a desire to explore these regions, either from Games Workshop themselves or from the like Total War community, for instance, there is, I think, a genuine, realistic possibility that we could one day in the distant future see something like a Total War Warhammer 4 that expands that theater. As for those that don't know, the Hinterlands of Koresh links to the Blood Naga, or the Naga of Koresh, which are a serpent-like race that reside to the south of Grand Cathay on that big jungle continent that stretches down towards the southern Chaos Wastes. The Hobgoblin tribes, or the Hobgoblin Khanate as they're sometimes referred to, are to the north of Grand Cathay, past the Great Bastion, and are actually kind of one of the primary antagonists of that region. They dominate what's known as the Eastern Steppe, which is a colossal Great Plains type region, a wide open area that is, up on a high elevation leading up into the various mountains, but also stretches far north up into the Chaos Waste itself, and is a colossal region full of great grasslands that are like oceans of tall grasses that people can easily get lost in, that have entire tribes roaming around, avoiding and harassing anyone that tries to come into their territory. Nippon, which is obviously very extremely inspired by Japan, and is off the eastern coast of Grand Cathay, and has not just one island, but actually a few islands that are it's a very, very powerful empire in and of itself that has actually fought Grand Cathay as well as the forces of Chaos and other forces. There is a Korean peninsula in Warhammer, though we don't know what it's called. It doesn't have an official name or any kind of really official content. The only maps that have ever tried to say what's there have only mentioned a northern tribe called the Dreaded Woe, but the Dreaded Woe are more of just kind of a classic Chaos tribe, and are not really like a group that has established cities and has a notable heritage in that area, which I suspect if Games Workshop were to actually look at expanding into this Eastern theater, they would probably develop something new over there. And then, of course, the force that they actually did not mention on here is also the Kingdoms of End, which the Kingdoms of End reside to the southwest of Grand Cathay and are that other major peninsula that peels off there, which are very heavily inspired by India. So there's a lot going on there, like a whole new adventure, a whole new world, a whole new set of games. But obviously that's not what we're here to talk about today. Right now is introducing Grand Cathay, and I think from Games Workshop's perspective, right now, not today necessarily, but the current era we're in is figuring out, will people be interested? Do people want to buy Grand Cathay stuff? Are people really eager and excited to see new armies, new minis? Do people want to play fantasy and see this Eastern theater? Because I think if the money is there and the interest is there, GW will be there in a heartbeat, because they follow the money. That's all they ever done. So, not that we're planning on it. I would bet that, knowing them, I would bet they are planning on it. But they're probably waiting to see how this is going to go. Rob, we did lots of work on Grand Cathay itself to try and make it look like its own thing, but our focus is on the story of the old world. This meant looking at how their forces arrive in the old world, what they do when they are there, how they coexist, and what might provoke them to battle. I will say, I will eternally have the strong feeling that whoever named this game, I say this not to be rude, but to be very blunt, was a deeply short-sighted fool. A deeply, deeply short-sighted fool to take the opportunity of expanding Grand Cathay and returning to the world that was, as it's kind of known, and instead of just calling it Warhammer Fantasy, being like, it's the old world, so they kind of feel like they have to pigeonhole themselves into focusing on the old world, at least for the early edition, the first edition, which in and of itself isn't the end of the world. I think that name in some ways is going to come back to bite them, but we'll see what happens. Whenever we take on a project like this, there's lots of supporting material that doesn't make its way into published material. It exists in IP documents, which we can keep referencing whenever we revisit them, and in notes, touchstones, and concept art. In this case, players are lucky enough to see more of Grand Cathay than usual thanks to the video game. Most of that would usually only appear in the margins. From our point of view, Grand Cathay is connected to the old world through Kislev, even though we don't have a playable Kislev yet. Far more than during the era of Karl Franz, because by then the world has changed. Rob says, Grand Cathay has more or less given up on the old world by the time of Karl Franz, and they are too busy defending against chaos invasions from the north. Okay, so that is genuinely interesting. That is a genuinely interesting set of quotes that explains what they're currently doing. I don't hate that. That makes sense. The idea that the current era we're in, chaos is not particularly powerful. Chaos is building up to the rise of Azavar Kul. I still feel like they should have had more distance, because I feel like the last 30 years leading up to Azavar Kul's invasion, chaos would be like chaos would have been swelling for a while, right? Everchosens don't tend to just like pop onto the scene. There tends to be a lot of build up to them. But I mean, at the same time, 30 years is a pretty good. It is a long time, I suppose. So we say here, Grand Cathay will end up retreating after the Great War against Chaos. It's like our Horus Heresy. The characters believe that a great victory has been won and Chaos is defeated, but in truth it hasn't. The result is a disaster. Chaos has returned to the world, and its shadow never retreats again. All those Kislevite settlements that extend across the Great Steppe from the western marches to Grand Cathay gradually become marauder tribes over the next 2 centuries. All those relationships change, all the trade routes shut down. You can see the cities on our maps like the interactive one available here. Always pay attention because the clues are there. This is the main route through which Grand Cathay is connected to the old world, and all that ends after the siege of Prague. Azavar Kul is defeated, but the world changes and Grand Cathay becomes more distant. So we'll take a look at the map stuff in a minute, but I will say that I genuinely love this. I love that they're thinking about this. I love that they're planning this in from the beginning. This is something me and Andy talked about quite a bit. If you go back and watch some of the Lorebeards episodes we did on the map and some of my personal diatribes on the map, of they're doing a very good job so far of setting up a lot of interesting things going on in the world and providing bowling pins for Chaos to knock down. I really hope we get to see and enjoy, as the old world carries on, I hope we get to see Azavar Kul come down like a thunderbolt and absolutely obliterate the expanded Kislev Empire. That he tears apart the northeastern aspects of Kislev and just rips his way down until he gets to the passes. He forces his way through the pass. I think that's High Pass. But he tears through the pass, and then he falls upon Prague. And obviously we have the really big, hugely epic battle at Prague that everybody shows up to, especially all the Chaos characters. Chaos wins. They obliterate the city. They curse it and turn it to a horrible, damned place for the rest of time. Even when it's razed to the ground and rebuilt, it's still cursed to this day. And then they, of course, descend south onto Kislev City, where we get the big finale. I really, really, really hope we get to see that. You know, in this, they kind of talk about that a lot of those settlements kind of like fall to chaos, and the people that live there sort of end up becoming marauders with time. But I really hope we get to see a lot of those fortresses and settlements decimated, and that the people are either forced to convert to chaos out of survival, or, you know, they turn to really horrible forces in order to survive, and like avoid being massacred, but that eventually leads to them falling to chaos and stuff like that. So we'll have to see. But I will say, this makes Azavar Kul a much bigger deal than he already was. And Azavar Kul's awesome, right? Like, Azavar Kul's already the GOAT, but this already is going to make him such a substantially more significant threat that he's going to do what an Everchosen should do, which is that an Everchosen should be defeated, but despite being defeated, they score a victory that resounds through to the end of the world. Something that has a permanent, brutal impact on the Warhammer planet, until that eventually builds up to Archaon's final victory. So for Azavar Kul story to revolve around the idea that he breaks the Kislevite Empire and he shatters the connection between the East and the West, you know, he makes it where Grand Cathay functionally abandons the old world because they don't have that protected road that they're able to take anymore, and trade and diplomacy breaks down between empires, and they're just like, screw it, we gotta deal with our own problems. I think that's we're having a good setup. We're having a very good setup. Rob, in our time period, however, Cathayan ships are not an unusual sight in Marienburg. It's not right to say that there's a settlement of Cathayans in every big city, but merchants, ambassadors, and military escorts are all commonplace at this time. I don't know why I keep fucking, like, something I ate. What's rare is for the dragons to come to the old world to head of an army that looks like it could be an invasion fleet, which is what we get into in the second Cathayan Arcane Journal. The second. Where's the first one? Like, what? Where's the first? Okay, anyway. Whatever. Owen, one of the first things Creative Assembly asked was the alignment of Grand Cathay. They wanted another good faction, which Grand Cathay genuinely are, but they oppose chaos without being lily white in virtue, as should every single Warhammer race. No one should be pure good or pure evil. Well, okay, we can have pure evils, but, like, you know, there's different colors to evils. The Dragon Emperor is a long-established concept in Cathayan lore, but there was no particular mention that he was a dragon. That's very true. We had his title, but not his species. However, it's well known that dragons lived on the planet even before the old ones turned up, and we quickly came to understand him as one of the original inhabitants of the world. This weaves him into the setting and sets him up in opposition to the old ones. Very true. Xin Yang is one of the original dragons, and his hunting grounds were what became Grand Cathay. He was a little smarter than his kin and the other elder beings, for when the old ones arrived, he didn't try to fight them in their Saurian armies. He bided his time and learned the magic they brought into the world, and was able to survive as the world changed. The people of Grand Cathay soon started looking to him for leadership, and he reluctantly took up the role of emperor, leading them through the collapse of the Polar Gates and the Age of Chaos. I will say I love Xin Yang's design. His human form has an incredible design. He looks fantastic. I love his armor. I love his crown. I love everything about him. He looks great. He remembers the world as it was before the old ones established the geometric web and moved the planet closer to the sun. He did not want them messing with things. They brought about the extinction of many races that have been forgotten, the Sky Titans and other monsters. He preferred the climate as it was. It was colder and more suitable for dragons. He will remember the oldest of the dragon ogres before they signed their pact with Chaos, and the oldest of the forgotten dragons who slumber beneath Ulthuan in the World's Edge Mountains. He's one of the last of that vintage still active, and will know many other elder beings by reputation at least. He's aware of Croak, and might have known Galroch before he was corrupted. Oh, that is so cool. That is so okay. This is exciting shit. This is very exciting shit. So he's gonna know Kolek Suneater. He's gonna know Kraken Rock the Black. He is aware of Lord Croak, which is saying a lot. It's likely he knew Garroch back when he was the Golden Drake. He knows the ancient dragons that slumber beneath the mountains. So he probably that means he likely knows Aminar, even though Aminar is a merworm. He still likely knows him. He also is going to know Ancalagon. So he's going to know, no, not Ancalagon, Calgalanos. Ancalagon is Lord of the Rings. Calgalanos the Black. So Calgalanos, I may be butchering the pronunciation. Calgalanos. I think it's either Calgalanos or Calgalanos. I can't remember. It's one of the two. But anyway, so Kraken Rock and Calgalanos are like primordial beings. But we now have it 100% confirmed that Shen Yang is also primordial being up there and that he knows them. That he was fighting against them or potentially making alliances with them. And we also know that he knew the Sky Titans, which is very, very interesting, as we're going to have some lore about the Sky Titans, who of course have gone extinct. It's a little interesting that they kind of blame the old ones for the extinction of the Sky Titans, because that's not necessarily true. It's not wrong. The Sky Titans are ultimately, to our knowledge, wiped out by the Ogre Kingdoms. Or by the ogres before they established the ogre kingdoms. But the ogres are a creation of the old ones, so you could argue that they're still responsible. But this is very, very exciting. The fact that he remembers everything, that he's a reluctant emperor, that he, in some ways has kind of not been forced into this role, but it sounds like almost was guilted into it. Oh boy, we got wifey. He is definitely of this world, but his consort, Kuei Yin, is not. Though she is known as the Moon Dragon and regularly takes on draconic aspects, she is a shapeshifter who arrived from Manslib after the Old Ones had appeared. It's from her that he learns to assume a human form, though the rest of her origins are obscure. Absolutely great. Fantastic. So far, everything's looking great. I love that they've stayed on course that Kuei Yin is not a dragon. She's not. Kuei Yin she's not a true dragon. Kuei Yin is something else. She's an alien. But she is a shape-shifting alien that taught Shen Yang how to shapeshift. Though I do very much like the confirmation that she came down after the arrival of the Old Ones. I believe that is relatively new information. It might not be, and we might have already known this from Total War stuff and I just forgot, but I'm fairly sure we did not have it 100% confirmed when she came down. So now we know that she came down after the Old Ones had arrived, which is very interesting. Together they have 9 children, and Grand Cathay begins to grow into a proper empire. This number is deliberate as it reflects certain Chinese myths. We know of 5 of the children who are currently active in the world. Miao Ying, the Storm Dragon, Zhao Ming, the Iron Dragon, Yuan Bo, the Jade Dragon, Yin Yin, the Sea Dragon, and Li Dao, the Fire Dragon. 2 more are named yet dead or missing. Shiyama, the Spirit Dragon, who guards the underworld, and Xin Zhu, who is lost in the Chaos Waste. As for the other 2, it's a bit like missing Primarchs. Oh, Jesus. It's like, we've got 2 missing Primarchs, and then we've got 2 missing dragons. Though I very strongly have my theories about where the last 2 dragons are. I would say the Shadow Dragon is, I would be willing to bet all the money in the universe the Shadow Dragon is in Nippon. I would bet everything the Shadow Dragon is in Nippon. And then the last one who would not be associated with One Wind, the 9th child, not necessarily 9th in birth order, but the 9th one, it fell to chaos. The 9th one absolutely fell to chaos, like undeniably. But we know Shiyama's dead, and we know that Shinzu is missing. I will say, I also really, really like that we have 100% confirmation that Shinzu has gone missing now. That Shinzu went missing before the Great War started. and has been missing for hundreds of years by the time we get to the era of Karl Franz, which I think actually makes a lot of sense and lines up well with the game. Of that, you would imagine that the dragons are relatively slow to react to certain things, and that Shinzu's disappearance had been a long fostering one. But I dig it. I dig it a lot. I dig it a lot. Oh my god, that artwork of Miao Ying is gorgeous. Oh, Dragon Mommy. Oh god, the things. Oh man, she's amazing. She's amazing. Also, good to see that Yin Yin is still a thing. I know a lot of us were kind of worried when Yin Yin didn't show up in Old World material. Yin Yin, from my understanding, Yin Yin's just not gonna be in the Old World, which we'll talk about later. The Monkey King. The Monkey King is worth mentioning because it is an example of how we've managed not to retcon anything. Some of the first sources with any detail on Grand Cathay are the Genevieve books by Kim Newman. There's an agent from Grand Cathay who mentions the Monkey King as being the ruler of Grand Cathay. At that point, we didn't know anything about him. The Dragon Emperor and the Monkey King might just have been titles applied by foreigners. But because it was so important to the story, and because we've decided that the Dragon Emperor was immortal, we had to decide how to deal with a real reference in a foundational text that had so much world building back in the early 90s. We decided that the Monkey King, who is a very real character living in the mountains of heaven, was allowed to believe that he was in charge of Grand Cathay for a period of time. There's a separate entry we found stating that the Monkey King even appointed a representative of Clan Eshin as an advisor. Whether that's true or not, we've left open, but it's certainly a period of history people in the Warhammer world might be aware of. Is he good or bad? That's a question. So that's awesome. So obviously we knew all this from Total War, and they're just keeping the information we knew from Total War, which is that the Monkey King is very much real. He lives in the Mountains of Heaven, which the Mountains of Heaven are a titanic mountain range that exists between End and Grand Cathay. So Li Dao has to deal with that and has to deal with the Monkey King a lot. But he's on that border between the kingdoms of End and Grand Cathay. And we know that I really like how they say in the article that he was allowed to believe that he was emperor for a time. Supposedly, a little ways into so Grand Cathay is building up to what becomes known as the Time of Darkness and Disharmony, which is that after the whole Asvar Kul thing, there's several years later where the Monkey King basically seems to get convinced by the Skaven of Clan Eshin to invade Grand Cathay and try and claim the throne. And either like he always kind of wanted to and they just gave him a little push, or they manipulated him into it, or we don't know. But he seems to actually invade. He does take the throne in Wei Jin, but it's likely that he wasn't really emperor, right? He called himself emperor. He probably made a mess. But the Skaven were more than likely who were actually in charge. And it's this affront, the Skaven taking power, that causes the Dragon Children, the 5 remaining kids, to team up against the Monkey King, and they unite their forces against him. A big fight breaks out, and it's finally resolved when the Celestial Dragon Emperor and the Moon Empress return. Because, what to see? We also have vampires. Several vampires, and we haven't named, fled here from Nehakara, as did... Okay, so I think they misspelled Herakte, because I think that's who they're talking about. Yeah, I think they just misspelled Herakte's name. Because Cathay is not a character. So they're probably talking about Herakte. I don't think Herakte's ever... Well, Herakte might show up in the Nagash trilogy or the Neferata novel. I'd have to reread them, which is kind of torture to do so. So, but I mean, they mentioned the Jade-Blooded literally on the next page, so they're literally, yeah, they're talking about Herakte. So several vampires whom we haven't named fled here from Nehakara, as did Herakte. The Jade-Blooded do exist, though they're probably not as you might imagine. We've steered clear of any tropes, but also of traditional Chinese jiangshi, which fans of Chinese cinema will recall as stiff-limbed hopping vampires. I love them, but they aren't Warhammer. Rob says, we have consciously avoided any body horror, and we decided that while there are indeed vampires in Grand Cathay, they aren't relevant to the stories we are telling in the old world. Like the Tigermen, they are another idea for the background file. And then they also say, and the Hobgoblin Khanate. That's super interesting. So it sounds like the Jade-Blooded are kind of weird then. So they've steered clear of tropes, but they've also steered clear of Chinese vampires. So I'm curious what they mean by tropes then. I'm not sure what they would consider to be the difference between a trope and a traditional and tradition. The only thing I could think is by trope, do they mean vampires that are like tropey vampires, just like Western vampires? I will say I'm a little surprised that they're just saying the Jiangshi are completely out. That seems a little silly to me. I think saying something isn't Warhammer is not a good move. I would say that I think that's a little silly. Listen, here's what I would say. If you can make squigs work, if squigs are a functioning thing in Warhammer, how are Jiangshi not Warhammer? What does that even mean? Are you saying like they're not epic enough? They're not funny enough? Like that, I grossly disagree. I think that is a terrible take. I think it's fine to say that like the vision that they have for the Jade-Blooded Vampire doesn't include Jiangshi, but to say that they're not Warhammer, I think is a ridiculous statement. There's no such thing. There is no such thing as something that is not Warhammer. Anything can be adjusted to be Warhammer. If you can look at me with a straight face and you could say, oh yeah, we're totally gonna do squigs. Oh yeah, we're totally gonna do Terracotta Sentinel, giant Gundam fucking soldier monsters. Oh yeah, we're gonna do Morngulls that have like giant horrible mouths and their intestines hanging out the back. I don't know why they're avoiding body horror. That also feels like kind of a weird statement. Like, have you seen your own minis? Nurgle is full of body horror. Slanesh has a good amount of body horror. Zinch has body horror. A lot of the vampire counts has body horror. What do you mean you're avoiding body horror? What? What does that even mean? That is a really weird set of kind of contradictory statements. Obviously, I don't know what they're doing with the Jade-Blooded because they're not revealing it. It sounds like they have an idea. But I don't know what they're trying to say here. Because the only thing I can think is they're talking about like creatures with like all of their guts just hanging in the air or some shit. But I have no idea what they're talking about. Like I know that in like Chinese culture, and granted I don't know a lot, I know that there are certain things that are not acceptable. So like there are certain displays of like corpses that are considered inappropriate in certain cultures. Like people, like I know like skeletons or skulls tend to be like a big no-no in certain places. But I don't understand what they're trying to say here. And it doesn't really matter because we're not here talking about the Jade-Blooded Vampires. But yeah, I know that's very strange. Because you would, I don't, yeah, I feel like, no, okay, to be clear, I would agree that I do not think the Jiangshi should be like the staple of a jade-blooded vampire, right? Like, I don't think they like that all vampires of the jade-blooded line should be Jiangshi, because that would be a little silly, right? Like, if every single vampire of that bloodline has a really stiff body and all they can do is hop after you. That's a little silly. I could see that. But the idea that there's none of them, to me, that seems a little absurd. I feel like Jiangshi would be like a good, almost like specialist thing. Like, I could almost see it being like a punishment, where if, like, kind of like how in the Vampire Counts, the Vargeist are punishment. They're vampires that have like are being punished in some fashion, and they're trapped in a coffin that's like wrapped around with chains, and they're like locked in there to go completely fucking insane, while there's also like warpstone laced water and blood that gets into their coffin, and it's the only thing they can like drink, and it drives them so out of their minds that between that and the mutation properties of the warpstone, they turn into those horrifying Vargeist, right? So like, I could see Jiangshi making sense in that fashion, where like they're a specialist type of vampire that have been like effectively very, very punished. Where like, you know, a more powerful jade-blooded vampire has struck down one of their lessers who's failed them in some fashion, and they're like bound in like by powerful spells and ritual magic or magical items. You know, they're like wrapped around with you know, things that make it where they go completely stiff and all they can do is hop, but they're still grotesquely powerful and surprisingly fast. Yeah, I don't know. I think that's very silly. But that's not the point of this article. Let's move on. We're unlikely to see any of these on the battlefields of the old world anytime soon, but they are fun to consider as a much larger part of the world of Legend. I'm totally fine with that. I'm fine with that. I don't think we need to see them anytime soon. Oh my god, look how good the Longma looks, dude. The Longma looks so good. The bottom line is Grand Cathay has been in the background since the earliest days, even since before the world of Legend had grown to become the setting we know and love today. There's still a tremendous amount more that could be explored, but we now know a lot of things we just didn't 7 years ago, actually, specifically. We got to look at all this old material and lay the groundwork for something very special. We had no idea what it would mean when we were approached by Creative Assembly. We didn't even realize we would be working on our own game, but it's become incredibly important for everything we're doing. We're now doing in the overworld. So I will say I'm glad that they are giving Creative Assembly proper credit. As for anyone that doesn't know, we would not have Grand Cathay without Creative Assembly. It never would have happened. Creative Assembly is the only reason that Grand Cathay exists. Games Workshop would have never done this on their own. And it's also thanks to Creative Assembly that the old world came back. Creative Assembly got us to where we are now. Like, they deserve full props for that. Now, I will say, I am very glad that Games Workshop came around on the idea of coming back to the old world and noticing how popular it was and that people loved it and wanted to be a part of it again, and all that stuff. And it's nice to see. It's nice to see. And Creative Assembly really does deserve all the props in the world, because I'll tell you guys, they had to fight for it. They had to fight for it. It wasn't like CA didn't get to just walk up to Games Workshop and be like, can we do Grand Cathay? And GW was like, yeah, sure. Like, no, they had to fight for it. And I remember all that happening. Those were interesting times. Despite the fact the pandemic happened right in the middle of the job, we still carried on working on it in our own separate pockets, and it feels very complete. It's a testament to how much we all bought into the project eventually. It's a daunting prospect to be tasked with the project of the scale of exploring Grand Cathay. We didn't know what it would look like, and longtime fans of the world of Legend have expectations, some going back 30 years or more. Meeting all of those expectations, as well as our own high standards, is a big risk. Grand Cathay has been a huge studio-wide endeavor, and we should celebrate that. As designers, we borrow these worlds. Different people become custodians of the IP at different times, and Grand Cathay wouldn't be what it is without this incredible collaboration between so many different people. I love how it has become a relay race of creativity. The people here today were mostly involved from the start, and I wasn't part of that group. So when it was handed to me, it was so exciting just trying to understand it all. Watching it develop as it gets passed on to other people is very satisfying. We've hired new artists to work on it, and they've all become passionate about it too. JTY obviously dived into all the material Owen wrote, and there's a lot more to come. As with any of the other old world factions, we expect Grand Cathay to develop as a faction as the project continues. And we'll be back next week with the rules. All right, so great, awesome. Definitely a lot of GW patting themselves on the back, but I think it's okay. I think it's an appropriate time to do that. Grand Cathay is hyper exciting. Here, let's move to this screen so I'm easier to see. Grand Cathay is a very, very exciting prospect. It's something that we have desired and wanted for years. I remember, oh my god, it must have been, I don't even remember how long ago it was now. I think it was during Warhammer 2. I think it was like it was probably like, yeah, 6 or 7 years ago. I remember Games Workshop put out this whole thing where they like asked the community like, hey, what do you guys want? And like I organized a whole fucking big campaign of like, okay, we're all gonna fill out this form and we're gonna say, please give us Grand Cathay for Total War. Like, please do Grand Cathay. Please do Grand Cathay. And people called me mad. People said I was insane. They said it was never gonna work. They say I was abusing the purpose of the poll, and how dare I, and fantasy's dead, and yada yada yada, and never fucking lose faith in the Loremaster. I always get what I want in the end. We're living in good times. I am very excited for the release of Grand Cathay. I think that we very much, from everything that I have heard and from everything that I believe as someone that, to put it very bluntly, I feel extremely well informed on the topic, I very strongly believe that we are at a crossroads. And we're approaching a crossroads, I should say. Where the release of Grand Cathay, and it's something I will talk more about in the near future, the release of Grand Cathay is a proving ground moment. It is the fork in the road that we are coming to see if the interest is there. Is the old world a popular game? Do people buy the minis? Do people spend money on this game? Can this game compete with Age of Sigmar, Horus Heresy, 40K, whatever? I hope the answer is yes. If it can hold its own, if it can prove to be popular and beloved amongst titans, then I think there is a very deep, realistic chance that Games Workshop will do what they're hinting they want to do in this article, which is they will continue to explore the world. They will continue to explore Grand Cathay. They will continue to explore the Far East and show us things like Nippon, the Hobgoblin Khanate, the Kingdoms of End, the Naga of Koresh. There's a lot more to come. And assuming that we can get GW to treat Creative Assembly with the respect that they should, because without Creative Assembly, none of this would have been possible. Hopefully, they can be convinced to grant, not force them to buy, but grant Creative Assembly access to the old world IP to use for their Total War Warhammer game. Whether that needs to come in the form of Total War Warhammer 4 or just lots of expansions one day in the future. I don't know what it would look like, but I hope we get those. I will say, I'm looking forward to this For those that are worried about Yin Yin, I would say don't be that much. Yin Yin I just don't think is relevant to where they are right now in the story. If you look at the Cathay map they posted, I'm not going to pull it up on screen, but you can go look at the article. You're an adult, you can handle it. If you look at it, the map only goes as far east as the central Riverlands. It doesn't go to the coast. So the map of Cathay that they're drawing and working on right now, Yin Yin's territory is not on it. So she doesn't need to be there, to put it very bluntly. Yin Yin is doing other things. But if this makes bank, then maybe we'll get to see her later on. Because if we end up saying, like, you know, Nippon, or if the old world does well enough that GW gets their heads out of their butts and starts bringing back the legacy factions, and we're over in, like, Lustria and Nagaroth, then Yin Yin is going to be a very important character. But where we're currently at, she's not. So, that being said, I do heavily suspect she'll arrive in Total War at some point soon. But, that is going to be it for me for this video. I was originally intending to do this as a live stream, but I'm realizing that I need to be better about like doing videos and then live stream later. So I will be doing a live stream to kind of casually chat about this, probably amidst while playing, like, I don't know, freaking Final Fantasy or whatever. Yeah, that's it for me. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you are having a lovely weekend by the time you're seeing this, and are enjoying whatever it is you're up to. Please take care. Thank you so much again for watching and taking the time. And let me know what you think down below. How do you feel about this article? Is there anything in it that jumps out at you in particular? Were there any like lore drops that you're notably interested or hyped by? Are you worried about anything? Are you excited about anything? Let me know. Till next time.